Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Geeks of the Round discussion of House of Cards. We're on episode 4, entitled Chapter 4. With me tonight, we have my lovely wife, Allyson. We've got Emily Lind, Kim Beasley, Lynn Ith, and joining us without video but by chat is Vita. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good. Doing great. Excited.
Awesome. All right, so we've all seen the episode. We're all gonna talk and try to avoid spoilers for the people who haven't watched ahead yet. Why don't we jump right into it? In an early scene in chapter 4, we've got one character whose name I don't even remember, unfortunately, but he's talking to Underwood, and he says, "Well, last I checked, I was a Democrat, and so were you." I think it was the first time in the series so far that the specific political parties have been mentioned. So that begs the question, does the political party matter in this show? And does the show, from an authorial sense, have a political agenda of its own? What do you guys think?
So far, I don't feel that the political party being distinguished was important simply because it could be either one of them, the way they were acting. I assumed that it was Democrat because of their tone when they were talking about politics and the way they were doing things. But I don't think it was important to distinguish.
I assumed it was Democrat from the way they were talking about the education bill. That was sort of my assumption going in, like some of the stuff they were bringing up. I don't think it matters, but I think it's silly to never say it.
I agree with that.
Like to just try to avoid. Some shows do that. Some political shows really, really don't want to say, and I think it's dumb because eventually somebody is going to say what party they belong to. It's going to come up in a conversation, and it just becomes too. You're being too coy about it. And so I'm glad that it was finally actually stated.
Yeah, it's like a lot of cartoons where the person's last name never comes up, and they wind up having to go through all kinds of weird machinations to avoid saying the name because it's become a gimmick. So I'm glad they picked a side, even though in the end I agree with what you guys are saying. It feels like it could have been either side without substantially changing the narrative too much. We also, the first mention of political parties was in this episode. We also had the first time, pretty sure it's the first time, Underwood and President Walker meet face-to-face since the start of the series. I think somebody who's in this room right now was talking about how that was going to be a climactic confrontation that the show was building up to. Was that you, Lynn?
No, I was just thinking that to answer sort of the last question that you made, I was going to say that once I found out, no, it's okay, because I was thinking about the answer. Once we found out that he was a Democrat, I kept thinking, well, if Underwood's a Democrat, then the president must be a Republican because Frank definitely has some kind of a bug, you know. Some sort of an issue with the entire situation, besides the fact that he was looked over as the secretary, and I don't know. It was kind of interesting. I
don't think that's true. I'm pretty sure President Walker is supposed to be a Democrat as well.
That's his. I mean, that's his party. He wouldn't be talking
Russo's
to
a Democrat.
Yeah, right, exactly. Russo was. Okay, then somehow I missed that. I thought he was a Republican.
No, they're all Democrat.
Right.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, in fact, I don't know if we've seen anybody from the other side of the aisle just yet, which is interesting, especially considering the plot of this week's episode involved getting basically the entire other caucus to stab the Speaker of the House in the back. But we can go. Why don't we jump into that? I felt like I felt like the momentum in this episode was a little strange. overall, in the show, we've got 4 plots that are sort of intersecting and taking precedence. There's, Underwood's sort of ruining the entirety of Congress out of spite as sort of our main plot. And then on the other side, we've got Russo's conflict of interest. We've got Zoe going through the ranks of the newspaper, and we've got Claire's Clean Water Initiative. And I felt like the main plot, there was the motion was not. There wasn't a whole lot of forward momentum in that plot because he had to get so many other things done in order to proceed with his education bill. Mm-hmm. But it also made the other plot, the Peters subplot, take a huge step forward because Russo turns into the collateral damage when he has to take his stand against his home district. So I was wondering if that affected the way everybody else was viewing this, especially if it was part of a larger group of episodes you were watching at the same time. Did the rhythm feel weird?
In some ways, I mean, I thought Frank's machinations were just as fun to watch as ever, but I didn't feel any sort of urgency in them. Like, I was much more caught up in Russo's storyline in terms of actually having any, like, dramatic stakes. Yeah. Which is weird because, I mean, Frank did, a fairly impressive coup that he pulled off, but it just didn't feel that important.
Yeah, I agree, and I think a large part of that is because it was so inside baseball. Because, in the last episode, he had to get the parents of this girl who died in a car accident to come around to his side and save face in his home district. And the episode before that, he had to derail an entire nomination process for Secretary of State. So in this episode, what he does is he gets the Speaker of the House to take his side in a debate that we don't really get to see much of. And he does that by threatening Speaker of the House's position and by throwing the Majority Leader under the bus, which is a lot more difficult to explain than most of the other plots. Yes, no, agreed?
Well, I don't know. The main point of it was he had to get the education bill on the floor because that was the promise was to get it in the first 100 days, and that was the whole point at the beginning of the episode was convincing, getting it on the floor.
When it comes to Francis and his thought pattern, he sees an end result that he wants, and he backs up to the beginning, and he starts where he wants to end up. He thinks a lot like I do, a lot like computers, in the sense that you have a goal in mind, and whatever it takes to get to that goal. I personally take the high road, but Francis takes whatever road will get him to his goal. He doesn't care which road it is, just as long as he ends up where he wants to end up. In this case, he sacrificed someone who didn't even realize he was being sacrificed. He wanted to have his name on the education bill. So what did he do? He maneuvered people around, including the president, to get to the point where his name was on it, and he didn't even write it. Okay? He brought in 6 people, 6 interns, and say, write it. And then he stuck his name on it. So it's one of those things where he was really showing that he is very manipulative. Very manipulative.
Extremely. And, talking about that, the Majority Leader, which was... I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. Did anybody catch it? I said it 3 or 4 times. The Majority Leader. I'll pull up the page, but Underwood gives him a choice early in the episode. He says you can be a wolf, or you can be one of the herd. Mm-hmm. And by the end of the episode, he actually uses that metaphor to his face. Will cull you from the herd and watch you die out in the wilderness. And later he looks at the camera and says, and he could have been a wolf. So it's this dichotomy that he lives and breathes by. You can be the wolf or you can be the herd. And in Underwood's mind, there really isn't any middle ground. Is that something you think the show is trying to set forth, that in politics you can't exist in the middle?
Oh, yeah. You can't in politics. It's either black or white. Even though they operate in a gray, it's black and white, but they operate in the gray.
Yeah, and the majority of Birch was his name, by the way. Birch opts out of loyalty, I think, to his party and to the speaker, to do what he feels is the right thing, to say, look, I'm not going to get involved in this power play, and he winds up losing his seat because of it. Not his Congress seat, but his title, just for getting in Underwood's way. That strikes me as a really nihilistic view of politics in general, in that, you know, if you don't play along with the guy who's after all the power, then you're just going to get screwed. Anybody? Does anybody feel like that's a message the show is trying to subvert, or?
No.
No. I mean, is this a straight-faced portrayal of our politics? Are they basically saying Frank Underwood's views of American politics are the way Washington actually operates?
I sort of view this show as the antithesis of a show like The West Wing, where as The West Wing idealized a lot of politics, and as a viewer you know that, and you still enjoy it. It's not like Aaron Sorkin was presenting it as this is how politics is. I think this sort of is in the opposite direction, which is it's what is the worst of politics pushed to the extreme. So I don't think they're necessarily saying this is how it is completely, but they are saying there is some of this in there. And then because it's a television drama, so you push it to the extreme.
Boy, I'm having a hard time kind of forming a sentence here about the way they're presenting it. It really is far more. I was thinking about The West Wing and how it was such an idealized portrayal of the way that we wish that, you know, democratic politics were, and what Frank is doing is, and he's moving like, I mean, it's a total smooth operator. He's like, there's hardly any, the only thing that's happening in his wake seemed to be, well, sorry, I'm going to jump ahead. I don't want to do that, so let me stop. But let me stop right now before I say something. But the way he's operating now, it's like it really is in the gray zone, and he's just smiling his way through everything. And I think that he thinks that he won't come out of this with any marks on him, or the marks that he doesn't care about. But I'm just kind of gearing up in my head, and I've only seen up through episode 8, so I don't know how it's going to turn out. But he's, you know, I think he's not delusional, but he's just riding his little quips, kind of like a wave. Yeah, and he's manipulating his own brain, and it's kind of weird to watch. And it's not politics. It's almost like the show can get so far into his head, and we're seeing his view of so much that whenever they break out and show his wife reacting to something that he said, it's almost like I'm kind of shocked. I'm not shocked, but it's almost like a left turn every time they do that, and it's good. It's necessary.
Absolutely.
And so I'm trying not to compare it to the West Wing, and I'm trying not to compare it to the UK version of House of Cards, and I don't watch the other show, the Sorkin show on HBO, because I don't have HBO, and so I'm just trying not to let it be like anything. I'm just trying to look at Kevin Spacey and the way he's playing against all the other people, and he's just doing it brilliantly right now.
Yeah,
that's funny because I keep trying not to compare this to Breaking Bad.
Another show with a middle-aged white male sociopath lead.
It's a lot like
that person
too.
Yeah, what I've been reading a lot of other people's reactions to the show, and it's getting a lot of that. Basically, any show that gets good ratings on a premium cable network is kind of in the same league as House of Cards, and it's getting compared to that a lot. I think the comparisons to Breaking Bad in particular are going to get more and more apt as we get through the series, but I don't want to get further than Chapter 4 in tonight's discussion. So I want to bring it back to what Lynn was just saying about any time the show switches over to Claire's point of view, how it changes the perception. We get a little more in the Clearwater Initiative today when Remy approaches and offers to double the donation, and Claire has to turn it down. It really raised the question for me that for the first time this series, which is his relationship with Claire any different from his relationship with anybody else in this show just because they're married? I especially thought that to that really passive-aggressive note that he leaves her, he gives her the photo, and it says, "You don't need Sandcore, you have me." Which wouldn't have worked on me, I'll tell you that. But
well, the thing is, she calls him on that.
Oh, yeah.
And yet goes along with him anyway.
Yeah, and spoiler alert, she'll call him on it again before the series is over. But
I think we're starting to get to see a picture into their married life in this show, in this chapter, sorry, where the assumptions that they were a happy married couple who didn't have any issues are blown out of the water in this chapter. I think you know, you guys were saying that you're trying not to refer to other shows. The first thing that came to mind when I saw Kevin Spacey in the first couple of chapters was the movie Unusual Suspects.
Yes.
That came to mind. I was like, oh my gosh, this is that character to the nth degree. Because that character took us through a lot to get us to the end of the movie where we were going, oh my gosh. And so I'm finding myself saying that to a number of the things that Spacey is doing in this show. I'm going, he did not. Oh my gosh. And when I can actually have a reaction like that to a show, that means that character is really good at what they're doing. I got to meet someone from Scandal this morning, and I told her that I love to hate her character. And that's the same way that I feel about Kevin Spacey. I love to hate his character because he is so good at what he does at being bad. And
absolutely.
And the way he treats other people, it's like, okay, I know I'm comparing to a lot of the shows. Okay, you remember if you saw MIB, Men in Black, when when Will Smith's character steps on the roach?
Yes.
That's how I think Kevin Spacey views everyone. That he can step on them without any regard to how it will affect them, just as long as he gets to where he's going.
Oh, absolutely. That reminds me back in one of the first two episodes. To me, they're kind of a unit. But when he's talking about the guy who he shot down, who was going to be nominated for Secretary of State, and he says, that guy, all he's going to think is, my God, all I ever amounted to was chitlins. It doesn't matter to him that he's taking somebody's entire life and hopes and dreams, and that's not important to him. What's important to him is that he's going to get the power, and it doesn't matter how he gets it either. His a character who's all about power. Which I guess brings us to the last thread of this episode that we haven't talked about yet, which was the everything going on in the newspaper. Was there what did you guys think about what happened in the Herald this episode, where Zoe gets fired?
Okay, I have a question. Who didn't see that coming?
I don't see any hands. Do you?
We saw that coming from the first show. Okay, when you go about things the way she did, obviously you're going to usually end up where she ended up getting fired. I wasn't surprised. Okay, can I admit I was actually doing a happy dance?
Oh, I hate her.
She didn't seem too She didn't seem too fazed by it either.
Well, she got fired in a way that is good for her, because it gets. She got fired in a very.
Gave her a platform.
Yeah.
Yeah, bingo. I don't have too many complaints about the show, but one of them is definitely the way the newspaper is being handled, especially with Tom as this blatant antagonist for Zoe, where he just completely is oblivious to the bigger picture. When he's having that conversation with the owner of the paper, and she's like, "We want her on the news. We want her on TV. We want to have a celebrity journalist here," and Tom just completely doesn't get it, and he says, "Well, she's not listening to me."
Yeah, you do sort of wonder how he got that job in the first place, if he's
exactly
disconnected from the politics of a workplace.
Exactly. I mean, I'm not a manager of a newspaper, but I feel like if you're in a high-profile job and one of your people is a celebrity, you don't fire that person.
Well, especially after your boss has explicitly told you not to, and to basically just let her do what she wants.
So, I was wondering,
did that was a classic.
I'm sorry.
I think that was a classic case of someone trying to prove their point, even though they knew it was going to have a negative impact on them.
Yeah. From both sides, actually. That was, Zoe trying to prove a point to Tom, even though she knew it was going to cost her her position, and Tom trying to prove a point to, sorry, I can't remember any newspaper owner, even though he knew that was going to be detrimental to his position.
Yep.
So a lot of ego going around here. I was wondering, for anybody else here, did anybody feel like those scenes kind of cheapened everything else we were watching?
The scenes between Zoe and her boss?
And Tom, yeah.
I don't think they're necessarily that bad. I don't think they're on the same level as the rest of the show.
Right.
Okay.
I think if the rest of the show weren't so good, it wouldn't stand out to me as much.
Okay, I'm glad I'm not the only person who thought that. Yeah.
It was too much intensity for what was going on. Oh yeah, fine, you're getting fired. Oh yeah, fine. You don't like what I'm tweeting or what I'm sharing. Oh yeah, fine. I mean, it wasn't life and death. Yeah, it was a job, but I think it was just too intense. And then,
as if he weren't over the top enough already, he drops the C word on her, and she comes back and says, when you're talking to one person, you're talking to a million. Like, nobody has ever made that statement in the history of the internet before. I don't know. It's just neat. I feel like it's not plausible to have a head of a newspaper in 2013 who doesn't understand how Twitter works.
Thank
well,
you.
it's also theoretically implausible to have a head of a publishing house in 2013 who doesn't understand how e-publishing works, but...
Okay.
Yeah.
Touché. You got me there. So the other thing about the newspaper subplot here is that I was a little... I don't know. I've been kind of on Zoe's side up until this point because I'm not sure what her motivation is. Is anybody else weird about that? It seems like at the beginning of the series, White House correspondent was the job she wanted, and now she's making up excuses not to take it. Does anybody else have a handle on what her ultimate motivation here is? What she's after?
Well, I think she's still after fame to a large degree, which you don't get as a White House correspondent. And also, I think now there's the underlying weirdness in her relationship with Frank that she definitely wants to keep going. Like, I think that became a very large factor. That if she took this job, the stuff with Frank would end.
That became explicit near the end of the episode, but I felt like she was already leaning towards no when that conversation happened.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else get that sense?
Yeah, she just wanted to have a crutch.
Yes.
She just wanted to be able to say, well, you told me not to take the job. Zoe's character is not one who wants to take responsibility for her actions. And she sees that Frank is a master of not taking responsibility. He's a master of going after what he wants with disregard for everybody else. So she looks up to him in that regard and wants to be able to do the same. But she's not a master at it.
As much as I hate to do it, I'm going to draw a comparison to The West Wing again because I think it actually is. No, it works here. There's
go for it.
I don't think there's anything wrong with alluding to other shows here. Go ahead.
There's a scene in The West Wing when CJ, who is the press secretary, is talking to a reporter who has recently been assigned to being a White House correspondent because he seems rather flippant that he doesn't want to be there. And she thinks and confronts him. He's like, no, I don't want to be here. I'm a reporter. I don't just want to be handed press releases and be told by you exactly what I'm writing. So I think maybe Zoe still has that, where she at least thinks she wants to be a reporter who's breaking real stories.
Yeah.
I think she's telling herself that.
Indeed. I think that she's also... I think Frank helped her realize that there are cards to play, and she might have some cards to play, and so she's trying to put them all out there, or something like that. So she's, I don't know. She's also, yeah, she's also coasting, just seeing, well, can I get famous this way? Can I get famous that way? Can I get in trouble this way? Yeah, can I make a stir this other way? Can I act innocent when I'm on camera, and then do this with Frank at night? And
do we want to talk about that? They finally hook up at the end of the episode. What? Is that a good move? Is that a bad move? What? I remember feeling really uncomfortable the first time through.
That's just as bad as a police person sleeping with their CI.
Exactly. There she is, playing all her cards. That's what she's doing.
Typical. Okay, I know I shouldn't shouldn't say this, but it's a typical move by a young person who hasn't been schooled in life.
It's a typical move for a younger woman to. I don't follow you.
Basically, she wanted to get ahead, and I look at this as a situation of a gold digger, even though it didn't really involve money. But she was digging to get information so that she could raise her level of prestige. And I think that she didn't think through really her actions. And when you don't think through your actions, you end up with the result that you didn't necessarily expect. So a number of young women, I'm not saying all of them, I'm not going to be general and say all young women, but a number of young women live their life until they learn a life lesson that you can't live like this and expect to have good results.
Arguably, though, Frank is living that life and he is getting good results.
He's playing the game because he's learned how to play it. She has not.
So you think Zoe's about to get some comeuppance? Because right now she does still seem to be, even though she just lost her job, she seems to be on an upward trend, career-wise.
Mm-hmm. I feel she's getting ready to be schooled. She's trying to wear pants that are too big for her. Too I'm sorry, I'm getting into some colloquialisms. I was getting some southern ones at that.
That would be appropriate.
Too big for her britches. That's what my mother would say, or she's fast tail. In the essence that she's doing things that she thinks she's ready for, but she's really not ready for them in her life. The actions that she's taking and the decisions that she's making. I'm saying this because I've seen the whole series. I'm sorry. And I've never seen West Wing, by the way.
So, yeah, I haven't seen West Wing either, and Vita just put in the chat that she hasn't either. So, you know, there's a few of us in here, but I don't know. I had a thought, and then it flew out of my head.
Well, I was just gonna say kind of the same thing and the same thing that Vita is saying in the chat room is that Zoe and Frank do have a lot of similarities, and on the other hand, they are using each other, but I think that because Zoe is younger, that some of what she's doing is like mimicking more than I really plan to do this as my step to get to the next goal or the final goal. I get that feeling from her that some of her stuff is okay. I can do this, and then I can do that, and I see Frank's doing this, so I'm going to do this too. He's playing hardball, and I'm going to play hard to get, and they're just bouncing back and forth like that.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know.
I remember what that thought I was going to articulate was, which was that she objects to the White House press secretary job on the premise that she doesn't want to just parrot back talking points. But in fact, that's kind of what she signed up for with Frank. The original deal was he gives her a story, he gives her a lead, she prints it. She prints whatever he says.
Right.
And she's happy with that arrangement.
Right. And so she said yes. And now she's saying, then she says no when she's offered this other thing because she can.
Because she can, and also because she's drawn to Frank, and she doesn't want to cut off this arrangement that she has with him. I'm wondering if there's something about the wrongness of it that draws Zoe to this arrangement as opposed to the more above-board press secretary one. What do you guys think?
Of course it does. Okay, think back to the first time she even realized she was on Frank's or Francis' radar. What was it? It was a picture of him looking at her behind.
Mutual Appreciation Society.
Definitely.
Okay, that says it all right there. She's clueless. She thinks she can play with the big boys, but she can't. Can you tell I don't like her character?
Oh, I can tell you don't like her character. I'm just trying to get it. I'm trying to pick at her motivations a little deeper.
No, I don't. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. There's, I think that in the last episode, the last hangout, we talked about Zoe. You, me, and Emily talked about Zoe a lot, and
yes,
it was. It's not that I dislike her. I don't hate her. It's that she's kind of making me wince. She's making mistakes that a lot of people make. That people make when they're moving up and moving through, and some of them are just like, oh gosh, So it's kind of it's just weird to watch it. It's kind of like, ugh, I hate to watch this more than I hate her, but she can be bratty at times, but
Okay.
I think when you get down to it, her motivation is that she's young and she's probably, 24, and she doesn't know what she wants, really, in the grand scheme of things.
Yep.
I think those are all fair assertions. And it's possible she hasn't even thought it through as far as drawing the comparison between the arrangement she has with Frank and the arrangement of being a Lighthouse press secretary. So, I don't know. We are getting pretty close to the 45-minute mark here, so I was wondering, did anybody else have any major topics they wanted to bring up?
We haven't talked about Russo at all. And I think
you're right. We kind of mentioned in passing,
which is sort of sad
because
it's a fairly major storyline. And
I'm sorry,
the one that I'm most interested in this episode, in terms of any sort of like emotional connection, is that it's added so much depth to that character. Where it's a character that I watch even when he's screwing up terribly, like. I so want him to not. Like, I want this guy to be okay. I want this guy to do the right thing. In a way that I don't...
We talked last week... Oh, go ahead.
No, it's fine.
We talked last week about how the moment where he's holding the bag and you don't know what he's about to do with it was one of the intensest moments we've had in this show yet, because you're genuinely not sure what he's about to do. And that same tension drives the hearing scene where he says he has no testimony to add, and it drives the crash he has later when he falls off the wagon. So it was tough to watch. Obviously, it's going to change our read on his character.
Russo is a complicated character. He wants to do good, but his weaknesses keep him from being good. Go ahead.
Well, there's something that I think we see in this episode that goes back to something we talked about in the very first hangout, when we were asking whether there was anyone who actually cared about their constituents. And so we see it in this character. And I almost wish we never saw it, because it's that more heartbreaking then. Because he does care. Like, it's not just this hurts him in his electorate. This hurts his electorate, and that really does bother him deeply.
Yeah, it's true. And he's the only character that we've seen so far about whom that's true. he's the only character that we've seen so far that really does seem to care what happens to the people in his home district. He does seem to care about the repercussions. You know, maybe also the guy who's the head of the Black Caucus. I can't remember his name either, but he's a minor character in the grand scheme of things. And Russo, I mean, his failure here is really it really affects us because he's pretty much the only person the camera's really trained on who does seem to want to fight for the people who elected him and not for himself.
That is true. Did he grow up in the city where that plant got closed down? Yeah.
It hasn't been said in the show yet, but the answer is yes.
Okay.
There's a later episode. He's gonna go back home and his mom is living there.
Right.
The house he grew up is there, so it's clear that he did grow up in that district. Yeah. Also, seeing how he deals with his kids also makes this hurt just a little bit more, because you see where he's trying to be a good role model and at this point failing really badly.
I know the feeling.
About Peter Russo?
Well, it's just hard. It was hard to see him fall like that. It kind of hurt.
It really was.
It's painful. But, you know.
Vita's writing, she had to agree with Christina for leaving after what he did to his kids. Did that affect? I mean, Vita's saying that his falling off the wagon and leaving his kids like that made her feel less sympathy towards Peter. Well, what did everybody else think about that? Did that kind of take you out of his camp?
I don't know. It's really hard because, you know, it's not like he's actually sought formal treatment for his addiction at this point yet. So he's struggling with some serious stuff that he's not getting taken care of properly. So, you know, as mad as I was at him, I couldn't shake the part where I'm like, but he has a problem and he's not handling it well, and when you're an addict in politics, getting it handled properly is hard.
That's true. That's true, and there is a lot of that, but I like you so much, why do you have to be such an idiot? kind of aspect about it, because, yeah, I mean, when a character like that does fall off the wagon, you really just, they're making their own mistake. You can't make excuses for them, but you're still, I don't know, I still feel a lot of sympathy for him.
Well, yeah, and I feel that way.
Even though he's making...
I mean, with people, with, like, alcoholics that I've known in real life, is you do feel that you see these decisions that they make that are terrible things to do, but at the same time, there's an addiction there. And that's not something that you can just get over. It really is a disease. And so I think that colors the way I see this character as well, is that I see in him people that I've known. And so my sympathy there, even when I'm angry at him, he still just breaks my heart.
Yeah. Poor Peter. That's all I really have to say about that.
Yeah, it's hard.
There's so much to him when there's really not anything to him. I mean, I know that's negating itself, but there is so much going on in him that he's not able to even be a good person. And he makes me want to reach through the TV sometimes and shake him.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, I know where things are going, and I'm just like, I just want to reach in the TV and say, run! You know? Run for your life!
We're going to have a lot more to say about him in future episodes, I'm sure. As he remains, to me, he remains the most interesting character. I don't know if that's true for everybody else here, but we're at 45 minutes on the nose right now, I think. Did anybody else have anything else to add?
Vita said something pretty interesting in the chat.
I was really... You mean about the family values line?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. There's so much to unpack there. I don't know if we have time, but...
Yeah.
So she's writing, and Frank wants to teach him about family values. Which she's talking about the quote where Frank was saying that politicians run on platforms of family values and then they sleep with hookers. And I think the line was, "I will make that hypocrisy hurt," which is not a. It makes Frank seem a little more sanctimonious than he really is, because I don't think Frank is objecting to what Russo's doing from a moral standpoint. It's just a useful avenue of attack for Underwood.
Mm-hmm. It's just another manipulation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting is Frank going on about family values when he himself does not appear to have any children. And while that's not really a sticking point for me personally, DC's a little different.
Yeah. No children, and we're seeing what he's capable of. I mean, we just confirmed he's having an affair, and come on, does anybody really think this is the first time he's done something like this?
His personality, his type, he takes what he wants.
Honestly, if he and Claire had a kid, it would be the most terrifying child ever. So perhaps it's for the best.
They have a little Damien kid. Anyway, there will be plenty of time to talk about that as well. Some fun stuff going on.
Yeah,
in this chat.
about next time I definitely want to talk about their marriage. It's kind of interesting.
And that's going to become more of a point to talk about. That's going to be raised textually in the show, so we'll be able to discuss that. Any other final thoughts? I think we're about ready to wrap this up then. So, for Geeks of the Round, I'm Jon Eric. Got Allyson, Emily, Kim, Lynn, and Vita via the chat, all saying good night.